Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Housing Committee. Today is Thursday, April 11th. Thanks, everyone, for being so flexible with the schedule with the storm last week. We will do roll call. John O'Leary. Oh, do you want to go, John?
Sure. John O'Leary.
Yeah.
Megan Corsetti.
Here.
Dagan Mrgadich.
Here.
Byron Meadow.
Here.
Mary Lone.
Here.
Jen Stebbins Thomas is not able to make it tonight. Eric Anderson.
Here.
Tracy Kozak.
Here.
Councilor Moreau.
Here.
City Manager Connor.
I am not a committee member, but I'm
There. She's happy to say she's here.
And Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
And I'm John Tabor.
Perfect. The first thing on our agenda, as always, we've listed out the minutes that we're giving to each part of our agenda, trying to keep within that understanding that this, is a topic that really needs robust discussion. So what we can do is that anything, because there have been some motions submitted by committee members that we want to make sure we get to, anything that we as a committee feel that we have not had enough time on, we can place on the next agenda on the forefront of it. So that we continue with that discussion, so we can make sure we're at least touching the topics on the agenda today. And what we'll try to start doing is weaning down the number of items on our agenda and expanding the time on them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And so the first is the approval of the minutes from the March 7th and March 31st meeting. Yep, I'm sorry, 21st. And we do have some corrections that were submitted by Mr. Anderson. And so we will get those on there. Correction.
Move to approve as amended.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Perfect. Okay. Now, the discussion of our goal statement. So we kind of came in line with a goal statement, but then sent it around so that we could all variously kind of change it and adapt it to something we can hopefully find some consensus on. So do we want to just kind of start some discussion on that, Councilor Tabor?
Assistant Mayor, I think since we had some good discussion and we have a draft, it might be most efficient for us to have that as a motion, if we can get a motion from the floor.
I'll move it.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
And then we would open up for any amendments to that statement.
It's the original statement that is listed here, sample motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. O'Leary?
Just a couple of questions. One is that, and I'm not an English major, but, with regards to, and I know we got a revision from Beth during the day today. I guess my only question is that, I'm not real good on understanding, punctuations and stuff like that. And I think that, but reading through it, affordable, diverse, should there be a comma in between that? I mean, I'm just trying to, I'm not an English major, but someone probably can help me with that, so. I mean, I'm just trying to put it in a format that.
Diverse is appropriate.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is that I think that, and again, thank you for all the information that was sent out. I'm still struggling with affordable, workable, and all of that stuff. So I'm not sure if we have the word affordable in there, is that a term of art that restricts us in any way, shape, or form?
So, as I remember discussed at the last meeting, is that we want to make sure that we're using, like, when I look at affordable and when I look at workforce, I'm going off of the HUD-based definitions. Definitions.
Yeah.
And I think that consensus that we kind of discussed last time was that we should make sure that we're staying within that, because I do think can be a personal subjectivity to what affordable is, what is workforce, where we lie in that.
So, but if we just have the word affordable in there, does that limit us with regards to anything that would fall under the category of workforce?
Not that I would maybe look to staff, but I don't think so.
I'm just asking a
And
question.
the reminder is that we're not making a policy decision. It's just kind of an internal desire of the committee.
I think that the way it's stated, the diverse, affordable, leaves it broad enough that you can include anything that's affordable from this end of the spectrum to that end of the spectrum, in my personal opinion.
And I respect that opinion, and I'm comfortable with it. You know, I think one of these things, too, is that sometimes it's the intent is more important than the actual wording, and having a discussion like this so that we understand the intent is what I was looking for, so thank you.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Eric?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've gone over everything that's been submitted to us, and I just always function a little bit better by writing it down, and I've tried to pass it out. Thank you for that. I would like to amend this particular motion to eliminate the number 500. And the rationale I use for that is that at the last meeting, we discussed that was a somewhat of an aggressive number. I don't think it was put in there with any exact information that would support it or not support it. It was more or less kind of arbitrary. It's not defined. It's very exact, 500. It's not 501, it's not, whatever. It's somewhere in that vicinity. But it doesn't distinguish what is the city's responsibility and what's the private sector's responsibility. I think that's an important factor of using the number. And so since that hasn't been resolved in any of our discussions, I just think it's appropriate not to include it in a motion that would come back at later and said, well, we said 500 every 2 years. Let's keep shooting for that target when we don't have any, like I said, no distinction of what the city's responsibility is and what the private sector's responsibility. And if it's all the cities, is it a realistic number? I mean, is there enough available property to even consider that the city would accomplish 500? So we can have that discussion later on, somewhere through the course of these meetings. But right now, where we're voting on a motion, I would like to amend it to eliminate that particular number.
So you would need a second for that?
Second.
Okay. And now we're open to discussion.
I guess I thought we were sort of taking this goal statement as like our starting point, and then we were all kind of coming back. So like I really tried to be thoughtful in coming up with some goals and objectives, because I feel like a one line item goal is fine, but what are we actually trying to accomplish as a committee as a whole? Because I think, you can say it's 500 units or whatever number anybody lands on, but I'm just trying to figure out like how we're getting there. So, I mean, I'm assuming that we're going to be looking at adjusting like zoning regulations. Are we going to be looking at the incentive programs? Are we going to be looking at, are there new tax incentives that we could offer for people who are currently landlords? Maybe they own a house or something, and if they offer it at a below market rate, they should maybe be rewarded for that, for being part of the solution. I think that we need to have goals and objectives and not just a line item to say 500. I know during Portsmouth Listens, there was a lot of discussion about having measurable goals, and that's something that like I do every day in my work. I love measures. I love to be able to say, hey, this is where we're at. This is how much we have left to get to our target. But I want to just make sure that as a committee, we're being really thoughtful about this. So those are just some of my feelings.
Perfect. Can I just, real quickly, I just want to, Mr. Anderson, you had said 500 every 2 years, and that.
Well, I know the motion did say it, but maybe I was just recalling that was there.
Yeah, I think the in the conversation we mentioned 2 years that would be the goal that would potentially get permitted within the 2 years of. Ideally thinking 2 years of like this working group committee. So I want to make sure that the public doesn't think that, this committee is looking at trying to build 500 units every 2 years in perpetuity. So I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, so I think that's probably represented in the fact that I would just amend the motion to eliminate that number so we could have some more distinctive discussion on that particular goal over a course of time.
Perfect.
That number, I believe, came out of a discussion around needing 1,500 units by the end of the decade. So we had divided 6 years into 500 every 2 years. I would amend the motion to say at least 500, not to limit ourselves, but to set a measurable goal. Also, Megan, to your point, I agree that just narrowly defining it it limits us. You know, I have here a sample motion that I would have submitted that says identify, adapt to, or dismantle the governmental and market barriers to the creation of affordable housing, which recognizes that we need to identify what's stopping us, we need to adapt where we can, and then we need to remove the barriers, which to me is, I hope, shared by many members on this committee, that that's what we're trying to do here. I also think we need to discuss the last line that creates long-term market sustainability. I just think that can read a little bit more, I think we can articulate that better.
Okay.
So we've got the amendment that is on the table right now.
To eliminate the number 500.
Correct. Is there any more conversation about?
Eliminating the 500?
Yes.
Or-
The amendment.
Yep, that is the motion that's on the floor that has to be voted on before we go back to any other amendments. Yes.
I see this as being our goal of what we're trying to get to and not something we're going to get punished if we don't get there. So I think setting a goal sets your sights to then figure out what all those objectives are to get to that goal. So I see this as if you don't have a number in there, you don't have a goal in mind.
Yeah.
You don't have that level of what now, how do we create the zoning, create the changes? And I see this as not just the city doing it. I see this as how do we change how the city functions so that the private sector can do some, the city might do some, you know, can we count every ADU that gets permitted in the next 2 years? Because we consider those the possibility of having, you know, something affordable to the person that they might be renting to. So I see this as a much broader topic of a number just really sets your sights to where you need to get your zoning and your objectives in order to support that. But that's just my 2 cents.
Councilor Tabor?
To Dagan's point, yes, we did make this aggressive because we also, as Dagan asked the question, well, what's the need? And the need is quite large. I thought this number was high, and then the other day I saw the mayor of Somersworth say that they had managed to incentivize or create 400 units in one term. They have more land area. Ours is a bigger challenge because we're going to have to look at places where we can find density, since we don't have the kind of wide open land situation. But I do think it's very important to have a goal to go after. Otherwise, we can get too far down into policy discussions. And I think we should measure each policy effort that we want to make as how will it help us get towards that goal of 500?
Okay. So we can, any more discussion on the amendment on the table? Okay, so we can take a vote for amendment on the table.
Roll call.
Oh, we'll do a roll call.
Did we come up with some type of housekeeping that we would take public comment prior to any motion?
We have public comment on the agenda coming up.
But that would be after we take a vote
For the goal.
For the goal, yes.
for the goal.
The goal was on the last agenda, and there was an opportunity for public comment then.
Okay. I just would ask, I knew there was, I knew there was something that we might not have done, I would say correctly or incorrectly, but public comment, I think, is an important component of this, of any discussion.
Absolutely.
That we have. And so when something comes up that there's an opportunity for public discussion, I just just want to remind us that that was what we said we would do.
Absolutely. It was my understanding prior to committee member motions that we would do public comment, which is why we've adjusted. And I know this has come up a couple times, and it was said last time in public comment, so I'll just discuss it really quick before we take this vote. It is a common practice in a lot of committees that public comment comes at the very end of the meeting prior to adjournment. Some committees have a hybrid type of public comment. Some committees don't have public comment. So there's no, I don't think, as you said, there's no right or wrong answer. This was brought up through a conversation with a committee member, and I said, you know, this is a very important motion further down in the agenda that was brought forward by a committee member, so that is why that adjustment was made. If it's something that the committee going forward would like public comment before any motion, then that is something that we can discuss after this motion and kind of adjust. I think it can be a fluid situation, especially as we are a blue ribbon committee. We can adjust as, you know, within the committee's purview of what, you know, we think is best. So we'll call the vote for this.
I just have
Yes,
one
yes.
more clarifying question, and it's just because I'm trying to understand like our impact and our abilities. So we can't make changes; we make recommendations for changes. So I
Correct.
think that whatever motion we have, it needs to be very clear that we are making recommendations.
Correct.
We're recommending and referring.
Correct.
Following.
Correct.
So, I mean that I feel
We
like
are
would
not
be
a
hard-
policy-making body. The council is a policy-making body. And even as we get more into it, as we kind of discussed in the first motion, anything that is going to have to go with zoning changes, that's going to be referred to the planning board and then the council. So we are really an advisory, recommendation to the council.
Okay.
So yes.
So should our motion be reflective of that to like identify and create recommendations that support
Yes.
blah, blah.
Yeah, so what we can do is we'll vote on this, and then that can be an amendment for the next.
Okay.
So I will do a roll call vote. Councillor Tabor?
No.
Mr. O'Leary?
No.
Megan?
No.
Dagan?
No.
Byron?
No.
Mary?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Tracy?
No.
Beth?
No.
No for me. So that is, what's that? I can't.
yes.
9 to 1. No. So motion fails. So we are back. I almost forgot my own name. We are back to the original motion on the floor. And if there's any other amendments that would like to be presented at this time?
Motion to amend.
Yes?
I'm new at these Roger rules, so please correct me
Yes.
correctly. I have a few. So the first line, identify, adapt to, or dismantle the governmental and market barriers to the creation of affordable housing. Then we would add what the motion currently is. I would add to amend at least in front of 500 permanent units.
Okay.
And then I would say change the last clause, the one that says that creates long-term market sustainability, to develop an agile system that perpetually protects housing equality in the city of Portsmouth.
Can I ask you to read that as one fluid statement?
Got it, my friend.
A little slower.
All right. Let's see if I can do this. Identify.
Too, please.
I should have probably submitted it.
Yes.
Submitted this beforehand, huh?
Yes.
I had it last week. Identify, adapt to, or dismantle the governmental and market barriers to the creation of affordable housing. Create changes that support 500 permitted units of diverse affordable housing over the next 2 years. Develop an agile system that perpetually protects housing equality in the city of Portsmouth.
And we would be looking for a second for that motion.
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
So Larry seconds it. And open, it's on the floor for discussion. John?
My only, one of my concerns is that or dismantle. I like the or in front, but dismantle kind of gives, I'll tell you my perception, is that we should be hell-bent on removing anything that's an impediment. And I think the problem is that everything is a trade-off. And so dismantling has a certain connotation with me that means you kind of rip apart and destroy. And I think there are things there that would support what we're trying to do, but on the other side, the unintended consequences would be significant. So that's, as I say, dismantling has a, makes me feel uncomfortable.
Would amend be more palatable?
That'd be more palatable, thank you.
Okay, so friendly amendment from Mr. O'Leary to change,
Yeah.
to amend,
To amend, yeah.
the first
Well,
example.
can kind of look at it. Is there any way it can be like
Typed up and put
typed
in.
up and projected?
It's a quick turnaround, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
May I offer
Yes.
another suggestion?
Yes.
So taking the spirit, I think, of Dagan and then Eric and Megan and like the conversation of how we're creating long term, I've done some thinking and I'd like to share it. So also thinking about the overall system in which we're operating in as well. So what I was thinking was working at the intersection of housing, transportation, and environmental sustainability, advance of future-oriented best practice policy changes, which I'm not sure if we could do, and then advance development of at least 500 units of diverse, of affordable, diverse building types.
So if I can step in a little bit, these are all very smart and worthy elements of a goal. They're getting into specific actions and specific strategies. And so goals tend to want to be a little bit loftier. And it tends to bring a little bit of heartburn to some people thinking that it's not specific, that it leaves it open for too much interpretation. So I offer up the idea that if we're talking about a goal, later on, we can find what this goal statement is. But later on, we can get into the specific actions and strategies that are going to be done to implement it. So an idea is that you had mentioned, well, either dismantle or amend. So if we take the broad-based goal and we put in there a bulleted point of an action, it would be, the action would, through amendment to zoning, current zoning, we hope to achieve, or through amendments and coordination on transportation issues, we hope to support. So there comes along more adjectives and adverbs with the idea of action, while a goal statement is just thinking all those actions are going to be done with this goal in mind. Or you start breaking it down into too much granular elements that you're going to be struggling to proceed with the goal. So goal statements tend to be one sentence or two, and then
Not a run-on.
so it's this is the general direction we're going to go in. It may be over the horizon, but we have our compass out. The goal is going to aim us in that direction, and so your action is going to be, well, we're going to get there because we need to forge across a river, and the strategy is, well, to forge the river, we need to be doing this type of building a bridge. So you start marching along this direction. It may not be straight. You may have different compass points, but your goal is going to give you the direction. So,
Beth?
just some thought.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, but identify, adapting, all the changing things that we want to do should be subsets of your goal. But I do like the up to, because I think up to then says our goal is actually, we'd love to go higher than that, but we want to at least do that. So I guess that, I think, makes sense to change it, but the others definitely are sort of action lines, task. We're going to identify and adapt and change these things, and it's going to include the environment, it's going to include transportation, it's going to include zoning, it's going to include all of these many things that we want to identify and talk about.
Okay. Can I? It's hard. Okay. So do I have to say I want to amend it again?
Well,
Can
okay.
you triple amend?
Yes, so but this is where it can get complicated. What we can do is you can rescind the motion,
I rescind my motion.
and then we can.
Does the second agree?
Does the second agree?
I'm happy.
And now we can wordsmith it, and then another. Beside, it gets complicated when there's like 12 amendments, and we don't even
I get
remember
it.
where we
Yeah,
started.
because you want to make sure which way you're going. And I mean, it's obvious, like the commitment here is very evident on this board to do something that makes sense, but also make sure that we're following, the appropriate rules. So if I'm hearing everybody correctly, and it sounds like, I'd like to make this motion, that we, as a committee, identify, recommend, and refer changes that would promote and facilitate the creation of up to 500 diverse, affordable housing options to the appropriate land use board and city council for consideration.
I like it.
I'd second that motion.
Second.
I beat you to it, John. Okay, and now open for discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So, did I catch in there? So was it up to 5? I thought we were going to a minimum of 500.
Then somebody was saying up to.
Up to.
At least. I think it was at least. Maybe
At
I
least
used the
would be-
word.
At least. And
I
those
might
are
have
because
used
those
the
are
wrong word.
contrary. Yeah.
I guess, so my take on it was, you had also mentioned that you set 500 as the goal, but we might not make it. I
We
don't know.
won't be punished if we don't.
Right.
And I think too the conversation, and this goes back to Eric. To me, again, and then this also goes to what Howard said. This is the start of how we'll develop a strategic plan. Where that breakdown comes of what is in the private sector, what is helped reinforce in the public sector, that will have to flesh out in time. Because if we look at this, I'm sure many people saw the article about the Episcopal Church. Any project like that would be included in the permitting in the next 2 years. Any private sector, including the behind Tor, any units of those. So again, it will be a balance, and we'll have to work on where that balance lands. And I personally don't necessarily know if it's actually as important as just making sure that we can navigate a way for these to be created. For me, if the private sector would build them all, delightful. But we know that isn't likely. And so, again, figuring out a strategic plan to get to them, to me, it doesn't matter who builds them. It matters that we, as a committee, can come forward with recommendations to these other boards and the council to get us on the road to it.
Okay.
So just on the up to is semantically like limiting. It almost speaks to like we would do something to stop anything beyond 500 from happening, and that doesn't seem like in my mind anyway, it doesn't seem like what our purpose is, and I wouldn't want the language to say that specifically. So that, and then I think the first part changing the recommends, I think that's good, and I think represents sort of our charge. And then my only other suggestion is the way it reads in terms of diverse housing over the next 2 years, that creates, I think, and creates long-term market sustainability. I think those need to be separate thoughts, because it reads as it's like the 500 units over the next 2 years and long-term market sustainability, that's one thought, and those are two different thoughts. And I don't think it's reflected in.
Would you like to submit a friendly amendment to the?
Just literally the word and.
Well, that wasn't included in my motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you read yours again?
Yes. And I'll leave the up to, but recognizing that, some committee members may amend it. So what I proposed was that as a committee, we identify, recommend, and refer changes that would promote and facilitate the creation of up to 500 diverse, affordable housing options to the appropriate land use board and city council for consideration.
Motion to amend up to at least.
Second.
Well, so
Can
it's
I do
actually it's called a friendly amendment. So you'd be
You'd have to.
You have to
yes.
accept
So
it.
she would have to accept that, and it's okay if you don't, because it will come to a vote, and then it could be changed that way.
Well, can we just say 500 like the original one said?
So if you don't want to agree to his friendly amendment, you can say no. That's okay.
But then does it get killed?
Nope,
I know it's not like a bill, but-
no. Listen, I'm still reading Robert's Rules for Dummies every day, so you're good.
I guess that's fine, and we'd have discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So that motion was to change up
Up
to.
to at least.
To at least. Okay. Is there any more discussion? Eric?
I guess it's probably what I made of when numbers come around, but I think that if I could make a friendly amendment to the maker of the motion that would bring some distinction to the number. And the only distinction I would ask for is the words public and private sector after 500, so that later on down the road we've made that distinction, and we have an expectation from two sources, the public and the private sector, to meet that goal. So I think stating that is an appropriate move.
Friendly
Would the maker of the motion accept? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Could you read it one more time? 'Cause now I'm getting
Do you
lost.
remember as amended? Do we have it as
Okay,
amended?
hold on. I'm gonna try to do
With
this
both
right.
friendly amendments in it.
Right.
Yes. So up to, and then after. I'm sorry, at least, and then see.
Eric, were you thinking that it would be 500 diverse, affordable housing options from the private and public sector? Is that where you're trying?
Yeah, wherever those two words can intermingle into the motion, so that there is some distinction in that number.
Okay. So it would be identify, recommend, and refer changes that would promote and facilitate the creation of at least 500 affordable housing options from or developed by the private and public sector to the appropriate land use board and city council for consideration.
I have one more word that needs to be added. Permitted.
Permitted. So, okay.
Because we didn't
permitted.
want built, we wanted to make sure we said permitted, and it should go in right before affordable.
Okay, so at least 500
Permanent.
permitted,
Affordable,
affordable housing.
whatever, however you have the words, but permitted needs to go in right before that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
And did you accept the language about permanence?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Are you saying permitted or permanent?
No, permitted.
Okay,
So they have a
They got the
permit to
ticket
build.
punch.
Permit approved.
Okay, I just all of a sudden I was like, well, I don't know.
So
Barb, do you
Nothing's
have?
permanent.
Well,
I just want, in this motion here, we've removed the long-term market sustainability piece of the goal of the committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, it hasn't been in it.
Okay.
And nor is the 2-year mark.
Nor is the 2-year mark. Okay. So I think, if the maker of the motion would be okay, and obviously, I think those are very important to the overall goals of the committee. 2 years, maybe less so, but definitely the long-term market sustainability. I think that's, in my mind, potentially the most important thing that we're doing, as opposed to the specific 500 over some period of time, because it speaks to, the long-term, the fabric of the city going on in perpetuity. So,
Okay.
yeah.
is it?
So with that, Byron, what I would like to offer to the committee is that every committee member that has these type of insights that you have mentioned, to send them to me, and I will redistribute back out to the committee in the form of potential actions and strategies and things like that to help support it later on. And you
Sure.
can do some motion at the next meeting or some discussion on it as well.
Oh, sure. I just don't want the goal statement to remove, the long-term market sustainability part.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that a friendly?
Yeah.
May I ask?
Yes.
Could it be considered in the spirit of Megan's statement because of the comment at the end about putting it towards the council land use committee? So that would create, if we are making recommendations towards those. I have interpreted this as both pursuing a number of units, but then also pursuing like systems level change, looking at the zoning. And so that inherently would be in the spirit of market sustainability.
Of changing the,
Yeah.
But that's not in the motion.
It's not in the, I read it in the spirit of, but
Okay.
it was a option.
I would like it to say, and creates long-term market sustainability, as it was originally in the, would be my friendly amendment. Yeah.
It's becoming a very long sentence.
It is,
Yeah,
we're
that's the
going
hard
back
part.
from a couple
It doesn't
sentences.
have to be beautiful, it just has to work.
And it can, and, you know, because we are a blue ribbon committee, we can tweak things throughout time.
Yeah. I'm just trying to read this. I mean,
So I think I have, I think what you.
As our secretary, you
I
you
think,
have the
so I
notes?
have refer and recommend changes that support at least 500 permitted units from both private and public sources to the appropriate land use boards and city council for diverse and affordable housing over the next 2 years and create long-term market sustainability.
Yeah.
And what?
And creates long-term market sustainability, which is from the original motion from the agenda.
Is the maker of the motion okay with that?
I'm trying to just piece it together so it makes sense.
Do we,
Do
do we feel that we want to come back to this? Do we feel that we still need more time as,
Kind of spinning wheels here.
yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I just
One quick suggestion.
yes.
Promote versus, if it promotes long-term sustainability, I think that gives, because you're not going to create I don't know how you create it.
Yeah.
But I think promoting is a softer word, let's put it that way.
Okay. Just being cognizant of time. Do we feel comfortable with this, or I don't want us to feel rushed, and so I would rather us circulate this this updated one to the board to then discuss in 2 weeks versus having a. I'm sorry, next week. Instead of having one that we, cannot cohesively put together.
I would support that.
Yeah.
Only
Okay.
only because we've been around the table a couple of times, and I think we've refined it down to something that is agreeable. Now, just to kind of put it in its proper text is where we're at. So,
Okay. So then,
there you go.
I would make a friendly amendment to the original motion to table this till next week's meeting.
Seconded.
Well, you can't.
I can.
so I have to do that.
You would just have to agree to that amendment. Right now, that amendment would be that we would table this. We would get it into the verbiage and then distribute it and reconvene this discussion on the goal mission statement for next week.
I second that.
You accept? Yes. Perfect.
You accept it.
And then all in favor? Aye. Perfect. Great.
Okay.
I think
good work.
It was good work. I mean, it's give and take,
The
and
point of the committee, right?
yes, it is.
Hash it out.
Okay. So we have, next we have committee member comment, committee member O'Leary, under the title Communication.
Communication.
You have the floor.
You have the floor, sir.
Okay.
And I am timing you.
Thank you. When I first was talked to about joining this committee, I said I had a lot of questions, and I was told, we like questions. Well, I'm not sure that the sentiment's still the same. But and I appreciate the two co-chairs indulging me. I had some thoughts, and I'm just going to go through them very quickly because I was asked to be somewhat succinct. But I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is when we were looking at our goals, most of what we're trying to do is outcome-based. And I think one of the things that we're missing is communication. I think that sometimes we get so focused on trying to achieve an objective that we kind of let the communication piece of it fall by the wayside, and some of the comments that I've heard, and the fact is that, well, we may not have everyone supporting us, or it may not be politically. I think we need to do a better job of communicating, because frankly, I think we have a good story to tell. And I think if we take the time to tell the story and let people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, that we have a much, much better chance of getting much more community support. I recognize, I've been through this thing enough times, you're never going to get everyone behind you. We know that. But I think there are some people who have good questions out there that we need to take the time to understand those questions and try to be responsive. So what I think we need to do is that 3 things. First, keep the public informed, have an open process, and treat all residents respectfully. And let me talk to those very briefly if I can. Keep the public informed. One of the things that I was a little concerned about was the presentation from the Housing Authority. I think that their objective was basically to answer the question that I had heard asked, how many units can you do? And that's the question they answered. There were asked some other questions. For instance, Eric asked, how many units are you looking to build? And we got some kind of a, well, we really haven't decided yet. I would have been much better, felt more comfortable, because right after that, we get a copy of what they've submitted to the congressman, and it says 80 units. I would have been much more comfortable if they said, our application shows 80, but that's not, set in stone. It might be more, it might be less, as opposed to not giving any answer at all. The second thing that concerned me about the application that we received, the copy of it, was it says in there, transfer of property mid-May. Where did that come from? If that's something that they've been told by the city staff, then somebody in the city, we should be aware of that. I think that I don't know about everybody else, but I got blindsided by that. I just felt it was, not forthcoming to know what was going on there. So those are some of my concerns with regards to that. Also, I know that we're still in the process of it. We're trying to do a lot in a short period of time. So let me tell you, I had a couple of other questions for the Housing Authority, and I know that the co-chairs have been very helpful with regarding getting information. One of the things that I was concerned about, and I asked about it, was Portsmouth residents. Everybody says we want to make sure that we don't force people from Portsmouth out of town. So I asked, well, how do they, how are Portsmouth people treated? And they said there's a preference. What I'd like to see, and if I can make this request, there's 64 people, I believe that's the number, at the Ruth Griffin Place. Could we find out how many of those lived in Portsmouth before they moved in there? I mean, if, for instance, there were 50 people out of the 64 that lived in Portsmouth, that tells us one thing. If there were 12 people, that tells us a different story. So I'm just wondering, when they say that we give a preference to Portsmouth people, how does that equate to what the results are? And the other thing with regards to, it was kind of interesting because I was actually going to speak at the last meeting, but we ran out of time. I was going to bring up about, because I knew about the 1035 Lafayette Road. There was an article in the Portsmouth Herald 3 years ago about the Portsmouth Housing Authority wanting to do more building up off Gosling Road. What else do they have on their plate? Because one of the things that concerns me is that if, they're going to be doing Lafayette Road, it's one thing for an entity that's used to doing this type of thing to do multiple projects at one time. I'm concerned about the Housing Authority that, as Tom Farini said, it took them 6 years to do with Griffin Place. What do they have in place, what's their structure in place that will allow them to handle 2 projects at the same time? I mean, I think that's a legitimate question. One of the things that concerns me a little bit is the fact that everyone is pointing to the Portsmouth Housing Authority, and I have no doubt that they're a great entity and they could probably do a good job. But I think we owe it to the citizens to do some sort of a vetting process. Not us, the council. It's not us for the side. So what I would make a suggestion to the city council is that they do some sort of a vetting process. I've been involved in things that are called an RFQ, a request for qualifications. It's different than an RFP. Basically what you're doing is saying what you want to do, tell us how you would do it, and tell us what you bring to the table. Because not only do we have this, but as Beth pointed out at the last meeting, I believe, we may have another entity that would do a different project at the same time. I believe that was, a suggestion that something you mentioned. But how would we know if there's any other entities out there unless we do, some sort of a request or give people an opportunity to come forward and say, yeah, this is what I've got for abilities, and I'd like to be involved in something like this, so the council could make a decision with regards to who they go forward with. The other thing I think we need to do, and again, I'm sorry I'm babbling, but I had all these thoughts. I think the properties involved, there were 4 properties that were noted. The city should do an appraisal on all of them, find out what they're worth. I mean, Sherburne School, the city assesses it at $5 million. There isn't anyone here that thinks that properties get sold at assessed value, or that assessed value is actually the value of the property. Most properties are 30, 40, 50, 60% more valuable than the assessed value. So I'm saying the Sherburne School property is probably $7 million plus as far as what it's worth. But I don't do that for a living, but I think it would be important for the city to get an appraisal on the properties so that we know what we're dealing with. If the Housing Authority does Sherburne School, we know what we've got involved in there, that we've got a $7 million piece of property that we're committing to this. But those are the types of things that I think we need to do. A couple of other quick things with regards to that. The the original proposal back a couple of years ago was for 160 units at the Sherburne School. If we believe what we saw with the application, that's been dropped in half. I mean, again, that's not set in stone. But can we save the ball field out there? If it was a situation where 5 acres supported 160 units, can we save the ball field out there? Because one of the things, the assistant mayor mentioned at the last meeting that if the ball field goes, that she feels we should be committed to providing another ball field. As I've been through this with the police station, and we were told that if we took a ball field, it would cost $1.5 million to build another softball field. So, I mean, if that's the case, either, if we take the ball field, who's going to pay to build a new ball field? Those are the questions that they need to ask. And my last point, one other quick point. If there is, and I've discussed this with Councilor Tabor, and he says, make sure I mention it. If there is a lease on the land that whoever uses, I might suggest that the lease money that the city gets goes into the first-time homebuyers program to enhance that. Because now we're addressing 2 issues. the rental side of it and the purchasing side. But one thing I do want to mention is that right now the city is looking at at least two situations where there's the possible lease arrangement. One of them is the Sherburne School, the other is the South Meeting House. And for those who don't know about the Meeting House, that's where the Children's Museum used to be. And when it came up that there was an entity that was interested in leasing it, the city said, wait a minute, we need to be transparent about this. Comments have been made, we have to listen to the neighbors. We have to pay attention to the citizens who live around there and how it impacts them. I hope we plan on doing the same thing with any of these properties, whether it be Sherburne or any of the other properties, is that we need to make sure that we listen to the concerns of the neighbors, address them, answer their questions. Not everyone's going to like the answers they get. We know that. But address them appropriately, pay attention to the questions that are asked. And my final point is that we're trying to do a lot of things in a very short period of time. I think what I'd like to see is a kind of a long-term idea of where we're going and our plans to get there. Right now, we're kind of coming up with subject matter, things to talk about at a particular meeting. I'd like to have some goals as far as time is concerned. We'd like to get by June 1st, do this. By August 1st, do this. So that we can get a better handle on what we're doing and make it easier for the co-chairs to schedule things. I know Joe mentioned, we'll try to have less subjects and more time to talk about it. Well, when you don't know how much time you've got to work with, you end up trying to do everything in a very short period of time. So I think a longer term plan on how we're moving forward would help you as far as scheduling is concerned and help all of us. So I'm done rambling, but I told you I'd try to get it done as quickly as
I'm
possible.
proud of you.
Okay.
I really am. Eric?
Yeah, it's a perfect segue, and I agree with everything that John is. In what I passed out to you, I tried to reflect that in my statements that I particularly feel we're being rushed, not we're being very aggressive in our moves. I know the word urgency has been used in regard to this particular subject, but I think that word has been, you can take whatever meaning you have out of that word, but I think the most, I feel like there's some haste in some of the aggressiveness that we're taking in some of the positions that we're developing. And I know there's a difference between the two, and I would like to at least slow down. I think some of the things that John reflected in the fact that when we had a presentation from the Housing Authority, it wasn't a complete presentation. And within 4 days, we had the application, but it would have been nice to have that application before. I think we can dedicate a whole meeting to that application and asking questions. And I'm delighted. He's been writing like crazy, but I'm glad to see Craig here. And, I think he might have an obligation, or at least it might be a request out of this committee to have his attention for a course of a meeting so we can get into some of the details of what the application means and what some of the intentions are of whatever development's going forward. Right now, we seem to have some focus on Sherburne, and I think there's a lot of detail that we aren't really aware of yet, and they can be answered before we make particular commitments to that type of project. I guess, oh, and another thing, I just want the clarity, because there seems to be, since this committee is working under the direction of the city, and we know we have PHA very close by in this discussion, whose timelines are we working on? Are we working on the city timelines, or on some type of city timeline, or are we working under PHA timelines? Because they have timelines that they want to try and meet, and I don't think they should be, that this committee should be dictated by their timelines. It was a year ago, I think a little over a year ago, that we had the meeting at Sherburne, and that just ended, and everything disappeared for over a year. And then the next time it reemerged, we had the formation of a committee, and we're proceeding as a committee, but there was a lot of time in between that we could have addressed the sediment of what that meeting at Sherburne was in developing a more non-aggressive timeline. As a matter of fact, I like to pass forward for the record. This is a petition. I didn't create the petition. I'm just submitting it under the petitioner. It's 165 signatures that were collected with some reservations about development of the Sherburne site. So I know there's a lot of support from other people to develop that site as fast as possible with a sense of urgency. I think we should try and slow down, take this thing so we are completely informed of what this site is going to have to absorb and how it is going to have to absorb, what it's going to have to absorb in relation to the neighborhood and the community that surrounds it. I think it warrants another meeting in the Sherburne district. This petition has been signed by Panaway Manor residents, Holly Lane residents, Goldville residents, and a variety of other citizens around the city. So I'm not going to discard it. I'm going to say it was a piece of information that they took a commitment to sign and have some bearing in this discussion. So I'll pass that forward for the record and see where it might go from there. But I agree with what John tried to present. Thank you.
Okay. So making sure that we are, because we are over time, I hope you all are planning to be here till 7:30, but are there any more discussion relevant to Councilor O'Leary's?
Yeah. Communication, transparency, thoughtfulness in this project. You have an ally on that. But I want to challenge you that we are moving with haste, because affordability in the city has been an issue for decades. And something, the communities that I'm here representing, small business owners, the workforce, young people who are trying to start a family here, people who have built a life and are just hoping not to get squeezed out, this crisis has been ongoing. And yes, meetings in the Sherburne neighborhood so that that community can understand what's going to impact them, those are a necessity. That's a requirement of city government. But those are the potentials for impact that we're talking about. Those are what ifs. And the communities I represent, it's what is. It's what's happening to us. People are getting forced out of this city because they cannot find a place to live. This is not some specter of what could happen if the Sherburne housing goes up. This is a reality. And urgency, yes, we need urgency. We need to be thorough, but if we're not going, we have the property, staff review for the parcels of land owned by the city that are for the purpose of workforce housing. We have a document. Sherburne, across a spectrum of criteria, was the #1 most viable site.
I don't, this seems more of an argument for the potential for the motion. So I just want to stay, and I don't mean to cut anyone off. I want to stay within the very finite topic of what John was saying, which is essentially how I read it is what committee members want to make sure that the committee is doing within the way that we are governing ourselves. We can talk about PHA, we can talk about all of those things in another moment. I will say, like everyone in this committee, we received the application and then an hour and a half later, it went out to everyone. It was not something that was presented to council prior. There's a lot of the same sentiments about that, and we can discuss that. But I just want to make sure, because we do have really quickly Housing Navigator and then public comment and then a motion on a motion that has been presented that talks indirectly about Sherburne School, but talks about creating permanently below market rate housing there. And so I think your argument is very relevant to that motion. And so I want to make sure that we're staying just within the realm of how this meeting needs to move. So is there any other discussion on the points that Mr. O'Leary made, or any points relevant directly to that, that does not directly talk about any development of a specific site?
Super, super quick.
Yes.
I agree with the transparency in the process, and that it would be great to have a long-term agenda.
Absolutely.
I just want to be careful that we are not, there a few times someone has said there should be a preference to give housing to people that already live here. The people that already live here, they, for the most part, have a place to live. So I think it's super important to keep an open mind to let anyone who needs housing live here. As a small business owner, the employees we need don't live here, and that's why they don't work for us, and that's why businesses are closing. So let's just keep an open mind and not limit it to the
Make
people
sure we're
that
not
live here.
we're not discussing any type of discrimination.
Yes.
Like that is federally illegal in the housing world. Mary, I'll
I
let you
think
finish your
also
thought.
to that point, if we're receiving federal funds, I don't think we can limit that. I think there can be a preference for that. But some of the data that the PHA and I think Howard has sent through talks about the distance that folks are traveling, and then also thinking about 36% of Portsmouth renters are already cost burdened, and then I think 15% is like at 50%. So that's another point. And then I just had a question about the
Yes.
petition, if I
Yes.
could.
Yes.
Was that door to door to everyone in Panaway?
So we can
Oh, okay. I
the
can-
start of the petition is here. Well, we can't ask questions during public dialogue. I think
okay.
you can hear the question. So that
So my statement is that I live in Panaway and I was not contacted about a petition. So I'm just curious about how in depth this was.
okay. We'll just do literally 2 more, and then we're gonna go to the Housing Navigator and then public comment.
Yeah, I just want a little bit more on the preference around housing and people already living in the city, and just the fluidity of people's lives and where they live at any given time. I think looking at where they live now and giving them preferences is discriminatory, and I think on top of that, I'm coming from the school board, and we are seeing dropping numbers in our schools year over year for the last 5 to 10 years, and that's because of the housing crisis. It's because we do have discriminatory practices in our zoning and in our systems, and I think calling out preferences for people in the city who would be the only people who could take advantage of these types of programs works contrary to the goals, and I want to push back strongly on that. I feel about that. So that's
Can I
it.
respond?
No,
Can I
I'd like to
respond?
just
Hold on.
correct it.
Yes.
The preference is not to who lives here, it's people who work here. That's what it is. That's, I think, where the disconnect is.
and-
It's not to people who are already living in the city, it's people who work in the city and want to live in the city. That's the
I have
preference.
And the reason for my comment, if I can, is that we have a lot of people who say people are being forced out of Portsmouth. We want to keep Portsmouth people here. So this is one way of determining whether that's successful or not. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying that people, we've heard it from the mayor. The mayor says, I don't like it when people that live in Portsmouth are being forced out of here. Well, let's find out how many of those people are positively impacted.
Okay.
But
by
are we,
that type of
I'm
thing.
not sure we're going to be able to resolve that one tonight.
No, that's
Yes.
fine.
Yes. So if there's a discussion topic on that we want to talk, and I think that may tie into housing law. of what we can and cannot do, or what, not even we, what PHA or any landlord or any developer can and cannot do. And I want to make sure to, and then I apologize if I'm cutting everyone off, but we are going to go to the public now, to Howard, and then we are going to go to public comment, and then we are going to go to the motion, because there are a lot of people here for public comment, and we want to make sure, and we do have people on this committee who have to leave. But I want to make sure that we clearly understand as a committee, we are not a land use board, we are not TAC. We are a recommendation board. So when we are looking at certain things and talking about certain things, there is only so much within the realm that this committee can recommend and or outside of zoning changes that can be done. So when we're thinking about development anywhere in the city, and we are thinking about the quality of the neighborhood, that should be on our forefront. But we also have to understand that we have only so much legal mitigation that we can do. The same as that if we sold Sherburne School to a developer and they were were able to build a 10-story apartment building, there could be nothing done about it.
That's right.
If it was allowed by zoning, by right, by New Hampshire state statute. So I think there are important conversations to be had on these points, and we will get into them. But I agree with you, Mr. O'Leary, about transparency. I think there's been a lot of conversation about backdoor deals. I can tell you as a city councilor, I take personal offense to that because I've never had a sit-down backdoor deal or conversation about any type of backdoor, lack of transparency with any developer in the community. So I take personal offense when that is brought forward, that like there's a done deal. You and I have talked several times about an RFQ. I have publicly said I think we should do an RFQ to bring forward any nonprofit developers who wish to partner with the city to help us reach our objective or the goal of this committee. So, okay. So let's move on to the public. Howard, we'll give a brief update.
A brief update, another elevator speech, right?
Yes.
All right. So my update's going to consist of the supporting documents I've issued out to the committee to help them better understand some information relative to concerns from the last meeting. Those are comprised of a simple version about Robert's rules to help foster a healthy conversation about differences of opinion and perspective on workforce versus affordable. I provided a summary about the state of New Hampshire regarding workforce, as well as a little one page about frequently used housing terms. So we begin to have the same language and understanding of what the terms are. Also, in the packet is some correspondence received via the website, the forms that were submitted. There's 2 in there, and I'm going to hand out a third that was received today.
Thank you.
And for the public listening, on the city's website, under housing, there's a form that you can submit any comments, questions, concerns, similar to the way you can for the city council, and that information goes to the chairs, and it gets disseminated out to the staff to help support open communication and transparency.
Okay. Okay, public comment. Obviously, we have it scheduled as 15 minutes. That is not realistic, but we are asking you to keep 3 minutes in your heart because we have a lot of people here and we want to be able to hear everyone. I will just give you a little thumbs up when you're reaching close to the time. Please state your name and your address for the record, and please take a seat right here. Oh, I got it right here. Former Mayor Beckstead.
So thank you, Chair. Thank you to the committee. I just wanted to point out just a couple of quick things. When I read the application from Portsmouth Housing Authority, which was going to our delegates, it said affordable housing units. So we've had discussions, and it's been continued on between affordable and workforce. Now, we've all gone and we've talked about that the Griffin Place is the perfect model, 64 units. And this would be 80 units being that same model. I guess my question, and maybe Mr. Welch at some point will go and do it, is we all know that 64 units of workforce housing does not exist at Griffin Place. There's a percentage, just like any developer. And if I'm wrong, I know I'll be corrected, but I don't think that I am because I've been there from the get-go. I think it's 12 to 15 are workforce housing units that are in Griffin. Might be a little bit more than that, but it's going to be no different than what Mr. McNabb had gone and proposed, about 72 units and 14 units being workforce housing. Somebody has to pay for the cost. It has to be subsidized. You have to have fair market value to be able to subsidize what the developer, Portsmouth Housing Authority, Mark McNabb, or anyone else to pay for the project, because you're asking the developer for a long-term basis, 20 years, 30 years. I'm hoping that it won't be the same case when it comes to Portsmouth Housing Authority. So with that, I just wanted to point out, again, I was there from the get-go, that we did give relief to Portsmouth Housing Authority when it did come to Griffin Place. We relieved, and it was a land use board decision, but we relieved 90 spaces that were required by our laws and our ordinances to take place to have a development of that size. We forfeited 90 spaces. We all know where they ended up going, down the streets of Portsmouth itself and other places. 2, we gave relief from the building application fees. About $160,000 would be taxpayer money that would come in. We gave relief to Portsmouth Housing Authority to form Griffin Place. We also went, and the city paid under the CIP for the park that exists today between Feaster and Griffin. We also paid under CIP, the city of Portsmouth, the taxpayers of Portsmouth. We paid for the driveway and the entry to be able to go and enter into Griffin from the backside. These are important things. I don't ever want to be told that we didn't do anything for Portsmouth Housing Authority or for housing or affordability. We do it every day, but in moderation. But when it comes down to it, what is the most important thing? It's the taxpayers. What we're going to go and give up. I like the discussions that are going on as far as the amount and appraisal, whatever it is that we're doing. It's got to be a fair trade. It's got to be balanced. Just like boards have to be balanced. I still have questions about this board because I know there are people on this board that went and ran for city council and want to do a single-family zoning entirely. We have architects that are on this committee that literally go and work for people that are developing. They're going to be at a certain realm. I want transparency. I want the community to be involved. I want to have all the information for everyone so that we can make a conscious decision together, not just a few. Thank you.
Thanks. Next speaker. Come on in.
I'll be under 3 minutes, John, I promise.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah. Gerald Duffy, 428 Pleasant Street. I've been a resident for 40 years. I live next door to PHA Housing, about as close as that building there. We know what we're watching on each other's TVs. We're that close. And some of them watch Fox News, it's true. PHA is, I really admire PHA for its decades of what it's done in Portsmouth for low-income housing. And if they decided to expand the place next to me, I would support it, even if it was going to eat into our view a little bit. I can't speak for my wife, and I can't speak for my neighbors, but I know that I would support it because I believe in it. I completely understand why the residents of Panaway Manor felt sandbagged when they were presented with this first plan. I think anyone else would understand that and perhaps feel the same. And I also really understand why neighborhoods want to protect what they consider valuable in their neighborhoods. Portsmouth is full of gorgeous small neighborhoods with different personalities. So I totally get why, people get a little defensive when they think that might be effective. At the same time, the Sherburne School is owned by the city. So every one of us, all 21,000 of us, own a little piece of the Sherburne School. And the housing problem is a citywide problem. So we all have a right also to say what happens to the Sherburne School. So I also think that we have to acknowledge that the Panaway neighborhood is Colonial Drive is a full quarter-mile from the site, from the Sherburne site, and that it's buffered by an eight-lane interstate highway with barriers of trees on both sides. The traffic study that was done, I think, for 111 units showed very minimal effect for traffic. So I would ask Panaway Manor residents to support this project and to encourage the speed of it because we need it as a city. It's the PHA model where they're not answering to a profit motive, and they can provide permanent below market housing is kind of unique in the city, and I think we should support it. So I hope that you approve to move this forward to the City Council, and I hope that you find other projects like it to move forward to. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next speaker. When you hear these little chimes, that's your 30-second warning. I'll put my hand here.
I'd like to pass these around if that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah. You can just drop it and so that you can.
There's 12 on the top, 12 on the bottom. There's 2 pictures. I didn't separate
So why don't
them.
I do it so
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
can speak?
Ruben, we can also.
If you can bring it up too.
I'll wait till you sit so that I'm not filling your time.
Is that the picture that you were?
There's 2 pictures, yes. So just to speak on the traffic, so my name is Ruben Izagiri. I live on Colonial Drive. And so if everyone can see, this is a picture of the traffic going out of our neighborhood. And if we can go to the next picture.
No, it's not the same one.
Oh, is it?
There's another
At least
picture.
the 2 Ruben I received, they're similar.
Okay. So the other picture is the picture coming into the neighborhood. And what I understand is that the traffic study said there would only be 9 extra trips in the morning. 9 extra trips in the morning for this 111 unit project. And 42 return trips. That's ridiculous. I don't think this was any real type of study. Everybody knows also that the Liberty Mutual insurance has a full parking lot, right? Our little tiny neighborhood is so taxed with traffic. If you could see that up there, I have to sit in that every single day, right? And this is before people want to build in our neighborhood who don't live there, right? And so we have to deal with the extra workforce housing coming into this neighborhood and leaving this neighborhood every single day. But then you tell us only 9 extra trips are in the morning. That does not look like 9 extra trips to me. This is a very difficult situation that people like me who actually work work from the city have to deal with on a basis, and it's horrible. So I would like to have the committee look at this terrible situation that will only get significantly worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Oh,
sorry.
you got your stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm Tom Kaufhold. I live at 53 Rogers Street, and I abut a public housing authority project, and I abut the Ruth Griffin. And I just wanted to say one of the fears I had when that was going in was the driveway, all the people coming in the driveway, and the headlights would be right in my backyard. And I just thought there would be a lot of noise with the 60 extra, units there. And I found none of that to be true, that public housing was very open with us in the neighborhood. They kept us up to date on what was happening. And they even included us, a few of us that were interested in the archaeological studies that were done, and just kept us up to date with what they were finding. I was in some of the public housing, the housing circles here, study circles, and this is a very complex situation. And I know for myself personally, I've changed a lot of my opinion over the years. I mean, when I first moved here, I was very much like, I don't want Portsmouth to change at all. It's just the way it is. I love it. And, you know, I love the Piscataqua Bank parking lot, and I was like, can't every parking lot be like this? And I've come to realize that parking and parking lots downtown are really not a good use of land downtown. And that's not from anyone telling me that. It's just from reading all these different, you know, urban development things. So when the Ruth Griffin took over those 90 spots or took off the parking that was there, I know I wrote a letter for one of the residents that lived there that was losing their parking spot, and I helped them write a letter to complain to Craig, and because I supported his concern. But since then, I have not seen any increase in traffic, and I do believe that a lot of the people that live there do not have vehicles. But so I really support working as quick as possible, getting any housing anywhere that we possibly can, and that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Adam Rudig. I chair the Portsmouth Housing Limited Board, which is the portion of our organization that handles new development. I'd like to address a couple of I can't address all of the questions that were raised today because there were a lot of them and a couple of the high-level ones. I want to make a comment first, though. This is not my day job. I am a volunteer. We are a nonprofit organization. I volunteer with a nonprofit organization because I think this is an important issue. I'm a volunteer the same way that you're a volunteer on this committee. And so I think as we talk about these issues and they get important and the discussion gets elevated, I would ask for a respectful dialogue. An accusation of something improper like a backdoor deal or something like that, nobody in our organization deserves that. It's unfair. It's not aimed at solving our community's problems. One thing that we face as a community is that it's much easier to kill a housing project than to do one. There are a million ways to kill housing projects. We've been doing it for decades. We're very good at it. I think it's time the community wants us to stop doing that. I asked the committee, would everybody here be happy if the outcome was 0 units? That's possible. In fact, that's what we've done. So I want to address a couple of the issues and then talk a little bit about the PHA quickly. One of the reasons the PHA was created was to bring federal funds for housing into the community. That's, in fact, one of our main roles. The spirit in which we made the application for the federal earmark was to be able to bring available federal funds to the community. It's something that happened quickly. It came up. We got an application out in a day or two. There was nothing behind the scenes. We just realized the deadline was coming up. We did it. We think it's our obligation to try and bring as many federal funds into the community as possible. You can understand that if we had included 10 units in that letter, we would have gotten fewer federal funds out of the process. Nothing Machiavellian, nothing improper. That's the spirit of that letter. I promise. A couple other questions you've asked. Capacity. We have capacity. We are adding to our organization in hopes that we will be able to do more projects. You saw the announcement about Christchurch. We've known that's been coming for a while. We've been working on it. We know that we're going to be doing multiple projects at the same time. We hope we can. Let's see, in my last 10 seconds, is there anything else that I can address? The question about why it took 6 months to build Ruth Griffin Place, we were sued. 6 years, excuse me. I wish it was 6 months. 6 years. We were sued by people that opposed the construction of housing in Portsmouth. That delayed the project. It wasn't a capacity issue. But look, it's a difficult problem to solve. We're all in this together. I think that we need to do it as a good faith effort, and we'll do it. We want a good project wherever we build one that the neighbors are happy with. It's important to us. That's our spirit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Come on up. You know the deal.
Petra Huda, 280 South Street. I'm going to talk about a couple of things quickly. The first thing, I would ask is that someone give Howard some help. In going over the contents of the packet, I don't know if anybody else reviewed the minutes, but they were very difficult to follow. The sentences were broken. I realized that it was done by Google, but you still need to proof stuff. And I would like to know who is Page Choice. The next thing on that is right on the front of your agenda here. To help people understand what was in the packet, Howard noted section 205C. The inside is 204C, 56. So a lot of this stuff is very confusing. It's confusing to me, and I'm assuming it's going to be confusing to everybody else. The next thing I would like to talk to you about is the contents of the packet. I am still confused as a resident if this project is going to be affordable workforce housing, or what was put in the packet on this 204C. I read through the packet, I did some research on this, and I do not understand what the relevance of this is to what we're discussing here. Basically, this 204C refers to the Housing Finance Authority, which is state, and we're being told that this is federal. You just explained to us, Assistant Mayor, that we follow the HUD, I guess, criteria for workforce housing. Did a little bit more research, and what it says is HUD does not offer support programs specifically designed for workforce housing. However, they offer financing. So if my understanding of the law is correct, when a federal ordinance does not define that, it defaults back to the state. And the same thing I said last time is you're using affordable and workforce, and now we have a new one in here defined in 204C. So please clarify for the rest of us what we are really saying here. And when you actually go into 204C, we go down to Section 8. So I don't understand, and I'm sure everybody else on this board is still confused about it. The next thing I want to say is I totally support everything that John said, that we definitely need more transparency here, and discussing a lot of this stuff more is very important. The next thing I'd like to touch on is the motion that you're going to discuss next. You're putting forward a motion just to go forward on one property. I would like to know if this committee has been given all of the documents on how this property was selected. This was back in the Land Use Committee way back in April that was chaired by Councilor Moreau. We started out with 195 properties. Now we have 197. The rezoning is going in front of the council this next 15th. I don't know if the thing is done yet. I have no idea. But all of this information was not given to this committee to understand how we got down to that. So my request is, before you move forward with any of this, I think everybody needs to have all the data to make a very intelligent decision on all of this, how we got there and why. Because when I went through this, the 195 properties included cemeteries, medians, and a whole bunch of other stuff that obviously I don't have time to go through, but I would be happy to share all that information also. So something else for you to think about. Thank you.
Next speaker. Are there any more speakers? Come on in.
Hello, Aaron Garganta, 423 Colonial Drive. Thank you for the time. I'd like to just start by making some comments about the goal you were discussing earlier. When I had first heard about the Housing Committee and talking to the mayor about it, I think one of the things I expressed to him was that I was hopeful that the Housing Committee would take a kind of a master planning approach to affordable and workforce housing. Not only just for the city of Portsmouth, but also to reach out and engage with some of our surrounding communities who contribute to the use of the city of Portsmouth but don't really contribute much else to the city of Portsmouth in terms of housing. And I think it would be appropriate that this committee build some bridges with some of our surrounding communities to talk about opportunities to use some of their land and volunteer it up for development by the Portsmouth Housing Authority or some other entity that's willing to provide it. Because, you know, I don't believe that living in Portsmouth is a right. I think it's a nice to have, and some people might live 2 towns over and work in Portsmouth, and that's completely reasonable to expect that some people need to commute to go to work. A lot of us have been commuting to Boston for years, and we live up here because we choose to live up here. So, you know, when you look specifically at your goal, I think it should include affordable and workforce housing. There are definitions with income levels for both of them. I think you should be looking at providing units for both affordable and workforce level housing. And when you look at the properties that the city owns that are available for development, I think some properties would lend themselves better to workforce housing because you could charge more for those, and some properties would work better for affordable housing because you need more density. And not every property is appropriate for high density housing, which I'm going to start kind of big picture, which kind of leads me to the selection process. I didn't really find your selection process, not yours, but the selection process of properties in the city was very scientific. It was kind of sounded like it was picking out a couple of pieces of properties on the map and deciding they were good for housing, because several weeks after we decided, or the city decided, that Sherburne was the best property, apparently there were 7 properties that were appropriate for the police station to be built on, and about 3 of them weren't on the housing list. So I asked myself, why isn't Hislop Field over in Atlantic Heights on the potential housing list, but it's on the potential police station list? It's a residential neighborhood. It would be perfect for affordable housing. So, you know, I think there's some opportunities to improve the selection process for what we can build on. Getting specific to the site of Sherburne, the site is in a highway overlay district. It's noisy. Our neighborhood's been fighting for decades for a sound barrier, which hopefully, if plans come to fruition, we'll have some construction this year. But developing that site is going to have challenges building directly next to the highway. Not only that, you're building directly next to a large industrial plant that has process cooling equipment that runs 24/7. And if anybody spent any time hanging out in the pit, we used to call it, behind Sherburne School, it's incredibly noisy. I would argue that that would probably be part of the criteria for deciding what is the best site for people to live on, as opposed to other types of development if the city wanted to, say, sell the piece of property. When I talk about housing density, the type of structure that was proposed at 111 units or 80 units or 160, whatever, is out of context for the neighborhood. There's a single multi-unit structure in all of the housing surrounding that school. Everything else is zoned single-family residence. And so when I go back to my previous comments, when we talk about workforce housing, smaller in scale, at a cost that it's at a higher price point, but still below market rate, you could build fewer units and rent them for more money. But when you look at some other properties like Ruth Griffin Place, that building is completely in scale for an urban environment. So I think there really needs to be some thought about the type of structure that's being put out there. My final comment is I think the neighborhood has to absolutely understand what the disposition of the school is going to be as part of the planning board process for this project. I am not going to agree to let the housing be built without knowing what is going to happen to the school. It's not 2 separate projects. It's one piece of land. You put forth a project to develop the whole piece of property, and that's either renovating the school or tearing it down, because we don't want to find out after the housing's built behind the school that, oh, we can't renovate the school, we're going to tear it down and build more housing. I think the neighborhood needs to know what the full development plan, the real development plan is. Not to say there's ulterior motives here, but it's going to be incredibly costly to renovate that school. And I'm not sure that the Portsmouth Housing Authority is prepared to invest the amount of money into that school that's going to be necessary to create housing, say senior housing or something out of it, like, Connors Cottages or Lafayette School. But I don't think you're going to find a lot of agreement from neighbors to just say, build whatever you want behind the school and then come tell us what you're going to want to do with the school afterwards. That's just my comment, and, based on conversations with a lot of neighbors. And finally, I regret that a lot of people, trolls online, like to say that our neighborhood is full of NIMBYism and we don't want affordable housing in our backyard, because I think that's incredibly far from the case. I think we would be very welcoming to having new neighbors. I think we're just very interested in having something done out there that is tasteful, in keeping with the neighborhood, does not overwhelm the neighborhood by its scale. Our neighborhood was some of the most affordable property in Portsmouth for the longest time. We're all hardworking people out there, and for those of you out there that think, we're thumbing our nose at people who don't have the means, that is very far from the case. I just put a plug in for my neighbors who nobody I've talked to has said we absolutely don't want affordable housing in our neighborhood. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Any other speakers?
One quickie. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, careful.
I got an idea for the Sherman School.
Hold on. Manny, you know the rules.
I'm stuck in here.
You know the rules.
We'll make room. Just one quickie. Manny Garganta, 471 Colonial Drive. We're looking for a use of Sherman School, even with the workforce housing. Athenaeum's looking for a place to expand to. Spend a little money. We let the ball drop on that school. It looks terrible. We kept pushing money aside, money aside, money aside. Well, that's why we have it where we're at right now. But the Athenaeum is a good neighbor out there, along with some thoughtful workforce housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny.
Have 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay. Timer's on. Go ahead.
Genevieve Beckstead Muskie, 9 Sherman Avenue. I was able to attend that land use meeting, identifying the properties that were selected, and every single property other than the Sherburne had an adversity. And every one of those adversities is an adversity of Sherburne. One of the one that just jumps out was Atlantic Heights, only has one way in, one way out. We only have one way in, one way out. Every person, every resident that's only a mile or a quarter of a mile or a football field away from this building site has to drive past that building site. My other concern is the way that this project has been changed in the media. Is you keep saying Lister Academy, the school. And how it was presented was this building, and Aaron was able to point out that the building is going behind the school and not encompassing the school and has nothing to do with the school. And the school would be a vacant building, I believe, until you decided what to do with it. That's a misrepresentation of what you're doing. What you're doing is you are taking away the one ball field for these young girls that play softball, the only place that they can play. And I understand people complain about that it floods with water and it's not well maintained. Well, because our recreational department is unable or unaware of the needs of it, doesn't mean that we should sacrifice it. These girls have no place else to go. You tell us about the other fields on Pease. Guess what? Somebody else is already playing there. So you are taking away green spaces. And even if it wasn't a small softball girls softball team, there are children in my neighborhood. My daughter enjoys playing in a field. Why are you going to take that away from them? There's no reason for that. The misrepresentation of this project to infer that it's the school, it's not the school. The school will be a vacant building. And like Aaron said, I will be the first one to sit on that front porch and assure you that if you want to tear it down, I am going to object. The Langdon, or Lafayette School. Lafayette School was a perfect project. That one was fought by the community several years back, but eventually it did become housing. And you managed to keep the playground right in front of it. I don't think anybody in our neighborhood would object to you improving upon that school, making it something that's appropriate. But as you put, 10-story building behind it is not appropriate. A 5-story building, 80 units, 60 units, 130 units. It's not appropriate for our neighborhood, and it is our neighborhood. I don't care if you think it's a football field away. It's our neighborhood. It's the entrance of our neighborhood. It's where we live, where we breathe, where we raise our families, and you are taking away that from us. You're taking land away from the children. You're taking access and our ability to come and go away from us. And as far as being accused of backdoor dealings, I am tired of being called and shamed in the press by many people for having to, God forbid, say something in opposition to what the city officials want for our town, for our neighborhood. You're not asking us, you're telling us what you want. Stop. I spoke to the city council a week or so back. What is a good listener? Right now, what you all have done for this community is not representative of a good listener. You prove that every single day by perpetuating this, shoving this project down our throats in a design that you think is appropriate for us. We have told you that list that's out there, that was at that meeting, that's not published, that was not public, that was not recorded for the whole town to see on our webpage. You can see it on YouTube. In droves, Panaway spoke in opposition of this massive project. That's why you didn't get someone knocking on your door, because it was a list outside of that meeting that if you were in opposition, you had the opportunity to sign that list. I'm happy to knock on your door and bring it back to you to sign. I'm happy to bring more information to people, but what you're doing is wrong. It's not what we want. We're not afraid of progress. We're not afraid of improvement, but we don't like being bullied, and that's exactly what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. One, and then we'll go right over here after.
Good evening. I will try to be uncharacteristically brief. My name is Nicholas Rustino. I live on Colonial Drive, and I'm a lifelong resident of Portsmouth, and I want to echo Aaron's comments that not everybody in the neighborhood could be characterized as a NIMBY. I would say that I wholeheartedly support this project at the Sherburne school site. I would have to say that I don't know if 80 units is going to be enough. Certainly, I appreciate the work of the Housing Committee in terms of their dedication to addressing the long-term sustainability of the community in Portsmouth, and I really urge this committee and the City Council to, in making decisions that impact the broad spectrum of people in the city of Portsmouth, to consider a well-reasoned analysis of facts and data when making those determinations. So when it comes to the Sherburne property, when it comes to any other property, I think it's very important to consider the best interests of the city of Portsmouth. We have a housing crisis. We've all seen homes being purchased for $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 all cash. That means that there's a large number of people who currently reside in apartments who would like to finance a home but cannot. That distorts the rental market with a 1% vacancy rate. Subsequently, you're going to have a lot of people who are being charged a very high rent for their apartment, and they can't really afford to go anywhere. Finally, or furthermore, you then proceed to see that we have in our town 50% of our renters pay 50% or more of their rent in housing costs. Research has consistently shown that the #1 reason why people end up homeless is because they lack affordable housing. This is the issue. I agree with some of the comments that were made of our time. We need these projects. You're not going to get universal agreement on everything that you decide on. And honestly, you're not going to get everybody in Panaway Manor to agree on this particular project, but you represent the entirety of the city. I drive past the Sherburne property on my way to and from work every day. I get into and out of our neighborhood like a warm knife through butter. And I look at that site and I think to myself, that school is going to sit empty. It's just going to decay. There could be new neighbors there that we would all be, I'm sure, more than welcome to welcome to this fair city, whether they be long-term residents or newcomers. I grew up here. My parents moved to town in 1978. We've both contributed a lot to town, and I think that we need to give people a fair shot to do that in the future. Oh, and full disclosure, Mary is my spouse, so if you want to talk about backroom deals and conspiracies, she speaks for herself, I speak for myself. I've lived here my entire life, so.
Yes. We enjoy family comment. Next.
Thank you.
How many, if you could raise your hand if you were thinking about speaking, just so I can gauge. Okay, perfect. It's 3 more. 4 more, okay.
I guess I'll be the second person in a row to shout out Mary, who I also met during the Portsmouth Listen session. So, hi, Mary, good to see you. And it's a little serendipitous.
Name and address, please.
Sorry, thank you. Ethan Underhill. I live at 55 Ocean Road, Unit 17. I mentioned Mary because we met during the Portsmouth Listens sessions this winter, and over that project, it was very helpful for me as a new resident to get more context around the state of housing access and choice here in Portsmouth. I personally knew that it was hard to buy in town, and I did not know that 55% of residents cannot afford to buy here, that 50% of residents rent, and that only 1% of land is available for development. I also did not realize how old this discussion is. Between the 2017 Portsmouth Listens report, the 2022 housing market study that PHA compiled in part by consulting over 500 people around town, the pride so many people, including myself, must have felt casting their ballots in November for a slate of pro-housing candidates, the recent Portsmouth Listens dialogue, and the formation of this committee, it seems clear to me that a great many residents, those here tonight in the chairs and in spirit, want to attract and retain more people in Portsmouth. It is a winning outcome for all. This committee has, and hopefully the City Council will soon have, a big opportunity to deliver that outcome. It's well established that people in Portsmouth want more housing access and choice. I know that this project sparks a lot of honest debate. I do respect my neighbors who have taken the time to come here tonight and voice their desire to build elsewhere. To me, though, the Sherburne question has a very straightforward answer. Deliver the winning outcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker. And just make sure you please state your name for the record.
Hi, Cammie Saunders, and I live in the neighborhood, and I think it's funny when people who don't live in the neighborhood can come in and just say that I think this is a done deal and you should do it, and I feel, you know,
if we could please, so that Cammie can have this.
The Portsmouth Housing Authority already has the Sherburne site listed on their website as a signature project, so they feel like it's going forward, and I just feel like nobody's listening to us. I feel like, you know, we had a huge turnout at the meeting when you had it at the school, when everybody had ample time to learn about it and come and speak out. And I tried to get more information out for this meeting just so more people could come voice their opinion, and got shot down for that. So we posted, Megan posted on Facebook and on Nextdoor, trying to at least let a few people know about it. But we all feel very strongly about it. And we don't have anything against, you know, affordable housing or workforce housing or whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't fit in our neighborhood. Everybody's talked about the size and the traffic, and I'm sorry, but I live there. I try to leave and come into the neighborhood, and there is traffic all the time. We've got a ton of businesses in the hospital, medical buildings, Liberty Mutual, who closed their office, and they moved more people in, and it is a bottleneck. And yeah, you can say there's a freeway between us and that, but again, one way in, one way out. And if you add 100+ cars to this area, which there's no other place for them to go, it's going to be a traffic jam. People are going to be walking around our neighborhood. I heard the comment, oh, well, they're only going to go downtown. There's no reason for them to go in your neighborhood. That is just not true at all. People walk in our neighborhood every day from all of those businesses, and it's going to be 100+ more that do that, and that affects us. That affects me. I bought this house with my husband 14 years ago, single-family neighborhood, nice, safe neighborhood. You pretty much know everybody. All of a sudden, it's going to be 100+ more people in there, and I'm sorry, Ruth Griffin has been around for, since 2022. Let's look at Gosling Meadows. Gosling Meadows is another PHA housing authority. Yeah, and just in the police blotter again for a SWAT team having to come in and bust up a drug deal. I hear stuff about that. I've heard about Gosling Meadows since I moved here and thought, I got to stay away from that neighborhood. Well, now you want to bring that into my front yard. I've got concerns, and I think if any of you were being faced with having this kind of housing put in your neighborhood and changing your everyday life, you would be concerned too. And I think we have a right to talk about it. I think we have a right to get you to slow down. I think we have a right to have more transparency, like everybody said, seeing the application go out and all of the stuff that was specified. It's like, well, when did you alert all of us about any of this? When did we get a say? We haven't. I mean, we just keep getting, put it over there, and then you guys all can tick a box and look what we accomplished for the city and, at all costs. And I just think that's really unfair. So I don't like speaking in front of people, but I've been to most of these meetings, and I have a right to talk about it. I purchased this house set a certain way, and now you all want to change it, and it's not okay. It's disappointing. I think if you could find another situation like the Episcopal Church, open arms, great situation, great setup. It's not going to totally dwarf anybody in the neighborhood. That fits. Ruth Griffin fit. This does not fit. So please rethink what you're doing and slow down. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please come on up. And then we'll go right here to the left. And then anyone else, please raise your hand. Okay, and then, okay. We still do have a motion for discussion. Go ahead, sir.
Bill St. Laurent, 253 Colonial Drive in Panaway. Lived there for 50 years, and that's been quite a neighborhood. It's a wonderful neighborhood. We've had no problems for years, and a lot of ideas that I was going to come up with have been presented by many of my neighbors. One of the big things that I stand on, that at the meeting, which was brought up, we had at Sherburne, when this first came into view, that school was full. And before anybody left, I asked, how many people, before you leave here, are against this project coming into our neighborhood? And I'll say 98% of the people raised their hand, and the school was full. The auditorium. Mr. O'Leary brought up some very good points. I was glad to hear that, what he was asking and talking about. Go slow. This thing was spearheaded before we even thought about it. Anybody thought about it, but somebody in the heads of the city decided that this was going to happen, and you're wasting your time here because you are going to be forced into saying that Sherburne School is the only place, and it isn't. There are many other places that really haven't been looked at, and the fact that I hear, well, we all have these people are coming in that are working and they want to live here, but they can't afford it. I thought this project was to help people who lived here, citizens of Portsmouth, to be able to give up their homes and have a place to live their lives out. And some families that wanted children of people who've lived here. My children cannot afford to live into a project in Panaway now. I mean, and you say, well, all these people want to come in. Well, excuse me, but who are these people? And John brought that and made a good point of that. Who are we helping here? All the people that just want to come and work in restaurants and things like that, that's fine. But this should be thought of as a project to help people in the city, not outsiders. How many outsiders are dying to come in here? $1 million homes. That's all we've got in here now. Everything being built is $1 million home. So it's a desirous place to live here. So, hey, we let them build some low-rent Section 8 housing. That's what low rent is, and so is workforce housing. I've heard that there is not a terminology for workforce housing. It's Section 8 housing. People who can't afford to live here.
30 seconds, Bill.
So many thoughts are going through my head what's going on here, and I'm sorry it's gotten this far. Please, I understand that you were supposed to present to the City Council at the next meeting what some kind of a decision you're going to make. Well, please don't start it yet. Give it more time. John said, like Mr. O'Leary said, take our time. Look up the different things that we should be considering, like the people who's going to live here. I have so many thoughts in my head about this place, about what you're doing here. I'm just sad. I don't know how else to express myself, but I've lived here, loved it, raised my family there. My family can't live here now. So be careful what you do and look at other places. You have a big park across the street here. I have never been by here when that's being hardly ever used. If you're going to put people that you want working here, that's the place to put it, because they can walk or take their bicycle. They can't afford a car.
Thank you.
So give a lot more thought than what I'm afraid is happening here. I still think this is a done deal, and we don't have any choice, and we're going to be stuck with this problem after. So,
thank you.
And one more thing.
Yes, Bill. One more.
That's a dead-end street. You can go one way out and one way in, and I'll have put my dead body at that gate before I allow you to open that gate, so those more people can go through our neighborhood, crossing through.
I don't think anyone's talking about the gate. Don't you worry.
Thank you.
I'll lay down there with you. Next speaker, please. Just a reminder, my little hand flash is a 30-second warning.
Thank you. My name is Ronnie Martinson. I live at 180 Sherburne Road. Lived there for almost 30 years now, owned it for about 25. My wife has lived there for 49 years. And we purchased the home from her parents, who purchased the home from her mother's parents. So we have 3 generations. And all I can say about the neighborhood is that I've seen it change over the last 25 years. You know, it really started way back when my wife's grandfather purchased the house as a working class neighborhood. And, you know, it's evolved over the years. Yes, there's working class people in the neighborhood. I consider myself one of them, but, you know, housing's more expensive. And, you know, I have 3 children. 2 are adults. One is going to be graduating high school this year, and she actually asked me to come here. I didn't drag her here tonight. And, you know, I'm concerned about their ability to be able to afford to live in Portsmouth. As it stands now, you know, that's probably not going to happen. And I think this project, in my neighborhood, I think it would be a travesty if it wasn't built. And the way I feel is, you know, I've heard 80 units, I've heard 160 units. I say build a 10-story building and get as many people to live there as we can. And in terms of people being concerned about, you know, what kind of people are going to be moving in, well, I've had 3 kids grow up in this city, and they've had friends from Gosling Meadows and Wamasett Place and Little Harbor and Dondero and Elwyn Park. And you know what? They're all great people. This city is great people. Are there people that break the law? Of course, but we're going to get that anywhere. And to single out, you know, some public housing neighborhoods, I think is inappropriate. And so my thought is, this city needs to retain, not only bring in new people, but retain people like my daughter. And it's not going to happen unless we find a solution to this issue. So I'm just here. I live in the front of the neighborhood. I see the traffic every day. I leave the neighborhood every day. I come back every day 4, 5, 6 times. And I don't see how this project is going to affect the traffic coming in and out of the neighborhood. I just don't see it. It's not a big deal. They're not all leaving at once. They're not all coming at once. These are residential people. They have different schedules. So at the end of the day, I'd like to see this project move forward, and I am in full-throated support of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we had one more, correct? Two more. Okay. Come on in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm John Logan. I live on Dennett Street. And I came here tonight mostly just so you'd be sure to hear that there's somebody else in town that favors an all-out effort for affordable housing. This has been an issue for me for many years. I'm deeply concerned about it. And as I've gotten to know Portsmouth, I'm concerned about what's happening in Portsmouth. But it's not just Portsmouth. It's just about everywhere in the country. It's a national issue and is very difficult to deal with. And it's a difficult political issue, too, because whatever proposal comes before a city council or a planning board for discussion, it's not that hard to think of reasons to be opposed to it. Opposing is really easy, and proposing and actually making things happen is actually very difficult. The city council, I'm not talking so much to the housing committee, but the city council will take heat from any decision that it makes. And this is just the first one, because there needs to be a second one and a third one and a fourth one and a fifth one that you have to deal with, that from specific neighborhoods people come forward and they say, well, it's our neighborhood. We have an identity here. Our identity is at stake, and it matters to us a lot. And every neighborhood can potentially make that same kind of argument, and you just can't give into it in the face of a citywide problem of the sort that we have. Finally, I'd like to say something more constructive about how to talk about these new projects that are hopefully going to come online. I'd like to think of them as community building projects. It's not low-income housing or affordable housing projects. It's not housing projects. It's community building. Just like Panaway Manor was community building. It was workforce housing, highly subsidized by the federal government. And when housing was sold to people in 1945 by the government, the financing and so on, the costs were also highly subsidized. And it made it possible for a very wide range of people to be able to live there at that time. I've looked at some of the data on this. In 1950, among those new homeowners, about a third of them did not have a high school degree. That's the kind of neighborhood that it was. And yet it survived and developed over time and became really, I think it's a very nice neighborhood. I'm proud of the people who are here standing up for their neighborhood because it's a great neighborhood. But its origins were workforce housing, highly subsidized. For what? And let's not say for those kinds of people who, I don't know why they want to live here, why we should be giving them a break, why we should be paying for it. No, it's a community building project just like Panaway Manor. I think we should do it again and again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker. Okay. Yes. Oh, you were not raising your hand. You are raising your hand. Okay.
I get to be the penultimate. My name is Andrea Pickett. I am the Director of Outreach and Engagement at the Portsmouth Housing Authority. And in the spirit of outreach and engagement, I just want to say that we have been listening to these conversations and appreciate these conversations. Thank you all for voicing your concerns. I came here tonight with one small piece of a solution or an offering, which is that I'd like to invite you to come and tour Ruth's Place. And I understand there's confusion. What is workforce housing? I've picked 3 dates. It's starting April 25th through June 27th, the final Thursday of each of those months. We're going to open the doors of Ruth's Place at 5:30, and we'd like to invite anyone who's curious, what does Ruth's Place, what does workforce housing look like, to come and join us. If you want to tell me your pizza order on your way out, we'll try and make some special orders. But I'm really proud of Ruth's Place. It has several of my friends live there. I visited on the Super Bowl for the halftime show, I want you to know. And I hope that through outreach and engagement, we can take away some of this mystery and hopefully move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And our last speaker. You see me go like this? It's your 30-second warning.
Thank you. My name is Craig Welch. The past 11 years, I've been the executive director of the Portsmouth Housing Authority, and I also live here in Portsmouth at 77 South Street. I wanted to raise my hand and get up and speak because I didn't want anybody to think that I was hiding here. I really appreciate all of these comments and all of these really thoughtful questions. You guys have a big challenge ahead of you because the City Council here is the policy-making organization. We're not. We're here to execute on what seems to be a plurality of or most of the City Council wants to do something about this issue, and I think a lot of people in town do. And so to the extent we can have a lively conversation about that and any other questions that you have, I always like to say, you know where to find me. I'm your neighbor. I'm right at the Housing Authority. You can look me up. If you ever have questions about any of this stuff, then I always like to say, please first go to the people that most likely will know the answer. And I do this full time, so I might be that person that most likely knows the answer when you're talking about a lot of the technical parts of rents and income limits and preferences and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of timeline, this timeline is on the City Council's timeline. The only constraint that we have that I do want people to know about timeline is that what our sweet spot is that we develop property using federal low-income housing tax credits. That brings equity into the project. That was $8 million that came in to Ruth's Place, and we would like to do that again. You can only apply for those one time a year, and that's in August. So when we look at our timeline and trying to set up these projects so we can continue to build, we want permits for things by August, and then it takes a while to put all the finance together and then close and then build and then lease these properties. So it does take some time, and I also wanted to address especially Mr. Becksted's comments that all the units at Ruth's Place are not workforce housing. Again, I say if you have questions about this, about how it works, please ask. Of course they are. All of those were in the tax credit basis. All of those are affordable. All of those are workforce housing. All of them are permanently affordable. All 670 units that we own are affordable, and our mission as a local nonprofit is to keep it that way forever. We will agree to a 99-year affordability covenant on anything that we do. And I think we can all agree that Mr. St. Laurent is the dean of the. Well, respectfully, Eric, I think Mr. St. Laurent is the dean of the Panaway neighborhood out there, and I think he articulated it really, really well. Is that this kind of housing is where people want to go. They want to get rid of their house and downsize. This is where people will live. And a lot of people talk about their kids, and that's the thing that I think Portsmouth is grieving the most, is when their kids have to move out of town. And this is where they will live. This is often going to be the most affordable place, and in many cases, the only opportunity where they have to stay in the city. So I'm at your disposal to answer any questions, and good luck to the council, and we appreciate all the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who participated in public comment. So now the question is, we have a member-submitted motion. The motion, yes. So the motion is a recommendation to the City Council. The sample motion is recommend that the City Council works towards the official disposition and land lease of the Sherburne School property for the creation of permanent below market rate housing.
Seconded.
Well, so one of us has to make the motion.
Correct. So that's a sample motion, so somebody has to make the motion and someone has to second it.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. We are open for discussion.
Can I ask for a definition of disposition?
I would look to the city manager.
I think it would be along the lines of any process the city would run for surplus property. So the question to the council would be, what is the appropriate disposition? What process would you run? And we'll be talking about South Meeting House on Monday. So preview of coming attractions. It would be up to the city council to determine a whole bunch of things. Do you
Want to sell it?
Right. Do you want to sell it? Do you want to lease it? Do you have short-term or long-term goals and objectives? Do you go the RFQ route, the one that you mentioned, or do you consider something else? So that's
thank you.
Eric?
If we vote on this motion, which is basically transferring the responsibility of a decision to the City Council, does that eliminate this board from discussing any particular aspects of this project, site-specific?
What I would assume is that the City Council would then, there would be recommendations or questions or objectives posed back to this board on what would be the next steps, recommendations from this board to go back to council. So I would assume that what would happen is that some of the discussions that the city manager just mentioned that the council would look to take on, that they would be asking this committee for recommendations on that or insight on that.
All right. Well, with that statement, it has some comfort to know that the details of this particular project will come back to this committee for discussion.
Correct. As mentioned during our first meeting, part of this, the formation of this committee is to develop any potential to start the development of any potential land lease that would affect that property. So it will come back to this council.
Well, with that
or
in
this
mind,
committee.
the amount of public testimony that we've had here and the amount of questions that still remain, I mean, there's another 2 meetings of questions, that at least I could probably take up a considerable amount of time with those questions and to find out some of the detail and some of the definition of what this Sherburne project means. And I know in the application, and I can read it right from the application, that that the PHA will ensure development is consistent with neighborhood context. Okay, that's in the application. Also within the application, it says,
Eric, I just want to clarify in this motion, there is no partner or developer listed in this motion. So within this referral, I understand that PHA is here. I understand that PHA has been in the discussion, but very specifically in this motion, there's not any direct linked partnership so that there can be communication. So if this committee could ask the council, because we cannot spend money, this committee can ask the council to start an RFQ process to do those things. But until the council votes whether they are going to have a disposition of this land or not, we kind of are stuck, at least in the discussions that have been happening in council, feel that, we're looking to, I'm speaking as a councilor, we are looking to this commission to start the ball on what will happen with this.
this is a
this
site,
land.
but this motion states a
Correct,
site
but what I'm saying is that you are talking about the PHA application, and this motion does not reference PHA. So that's what I'm
it
saying.
doesn't, but I mean,
yes, but I think that the motion is purposely, very specifically written not to declare a partnership with PHA until it has had further conversations within this committee and further conversations with council. And I will say, this motion was in reference to committee member to Byron, and that was a very specific. We want to make sure that there is understanding that there needs to be more due diligence. As Mr. O'Leary has said, an RFQ, there are other possibilities. So I want to make sure that when we are talking about this motion, that everybody on this committee understands that this motion does not tie us to a developer. PHA can perform all of the due diligence that they dictate. They can spend their money how they want to spend, but this motion does not tie us to any developer. This motion also does not tie us to developing that land. It starts the process of the discussions in a more formal manner that will set the tone. The council will be able to set the tone of, hey, we want housing there, and now we are giving a direct conversation to the committee. But I want to make it very clear before we get site specific on the PHA proposal that PHA is not listed in this motion.
No, respectable. You can get into the details of the words, but until I can wipe my memory clean of everything I've heard tonight,
understandable.
It's this project is associated with PHA in Sherburne.
Absolutely understandable. I'm saying that this motion leaves the possibility of other nonprofit developers for permanently below market rate development.
I think with the amount of questions and dialogue that still has to take place within this committee, we should, I would make a recommendation to table this motion until more distinction in its clarity is established for us to take a vote on. I've just heard too much. I've still got a variety of questions that we don't have the time to address this evening, and it just still advocates that I don't want to say it. I know people take offense to it, that we're rushing the project. I mean, and I'm not going to take out of my mind that PHA is associated with this motion in some way, shape, and manner. Even though you say it isn't, I understand that, in the clarity of the way you read it, so be it. But PHA doesn't even have, they haven't even, we made, the last meeting, we made a recommendation for funding to PHA, to our delegation. They haven't even received the funding yet. So until that type of stuff matures and it comes a little bit more apparent that they are the entity of choice, the developer of choice in everything that we've heard, until that starts to develop and mature, that they have the funding in place, is $24 million going to take care of everything that they've said that it would take care of. There is just question after question after question that I think we can dedicate one meeting to just listening to Craig, and he's the top of the list. He can make those answers. He can give us some clarity to this, and I think that's what we need. I think to do anything else would be, so I wouldn't say irresponsible, but it would question our motives in this thing, and I would move to table it until further information is gathered.
Okay. Councilor Moreau?
Just to be devil's advocate, I see this motion as asking the city council, do you want to sell this property or do you want to lease this property? Do you want to maintain ownership and do something with it, or do you want to just sell it on the open market? And that is a policy decision of the council, which would then give this committee direction of where to ask, what direction to go and what questions to ask and what to think about. So I think that we just need the council to weigh in on that before we spin our wheels going down a road that the council doesn't even think is appropriate.
I wouldn't. I bet my last dollar. I know that I could predict the decision of the council is to, proceed in some way, and it would tend to, liken itself to a relationship with PHA.
Perfect, thank you. And just a reminder, as we get into these discussions, please raise your hand when you would like to speak so that we can make sure everyone gets a bite. Megan?
Okay. So just a couple of things. So one, just so I'm kind of understanding with this motion, should it move forward, it would go to the city council and then they would determine sort of next steps for the property itself. But would that would that have to involve like a public process? Like what would the timeline be, I guess, for when the committee would hear something back from the council on what their determination is?
So I will, if a motion comes tonight and is brought forward, I would intend to potentially bring it forward at our next city council meeting for discussion, so to update the council, and then it's going to take some time for staff to deliver to council options and understanding of the process of disposition.
Okay, and so is there, because I'm assuming that there's like an RSA or like a law that talks about the disposition process if we're going to like get rid of a school or get rid of a field, and so I'm curious how that would involve the public and then involve like the committee, like coming back to us. Just, we heard a lot of really great points on both sides of the spectrum tonight. And I'm just feeling like we owe it to the citizens of Portsmouth, all of them, to make sure that we are looking at this very thoughtfully, and that as a committee we are acting with integrity and we are getting the facts that people are asking for. There's concerns about traffic and whether or not the traffic study that was done makes sense, and I think it's important to potentially look at that again. I know John had brought up some points as well about making sure that there's transparency and the process is the same no matter where you are. So if it's the South Meeting House or the Sherburne School or one of the other properties, and he had also talked about whether or not there's the need to do an appraisal of those properties and what value and what information that would provide us as a committee in order to make a sound decision for the residents of Portsmouth, both present and future. And just re-engaging the community. I mean, the neighborhood, I'm part of that neighborhood, for anybody who didn't know. I mean, I've been asking all along, and I'm grateful to be a part of this committee to help, promote changes that make sense in our community, that are going to sustain our community. But what we do and how we act is going to directly impact our ability to see projects move forward in other neighborhoods. If this is a big flop, if people see that the process isn't inclusive, then I don't think it's going to be successful outside of this. I think we're going to hit a lot more roadblocks, and I understand that the process started a year ago, January, where I think it might have been you, Eric, had asked for a meeting to come back to Sherburne, for the community members to come be a part of it, because there was a work session that not a lot of us knew about. And I take responsibility for not knowing about it, and now I read everything that I possibly can. But not everybody has time for that, and I think it's just really important. The city is all of our home. And when I think about home, I think about a place where I feel safe, I feel heard. And if I'm going to promote a change in an area where I want to feel safe and heard, I think it's important that we, as a committee, make sure that the council is supporting actionable items that address some of the concerns, the very valid concerns that were brought up by community members today. So I think that we should table it to continue the discussion because it deserves it.
First of all,
And then
you're
John.
completely. Oh, you're going John first and then me?
You will just go here or here. There we go. There.
You.
Yeah, we'll go start Dagan, and then we'll go with John.
Yeah. Thank you.
Doing this project and doing this right is the most imperative thing that can come out of this committee. Because we do have the need, and you're absolutely right. If we mess this up, there won't be more projects. 500 units will not happen. As it reads to me, this notion determines whether or not we should continue asking questions, because it goes to the council and it determines their appetite for moving forward on the Sherburne School. If they say they are not interested, which I think the last election and the way that people ran, the way that they campaigned, shows that there is community will for affordable housing, I suspect the council will come back and say, yes, we would like to do what the motion states. At that point, as far as I understand it, then all the questions that need to be asked, we know we have a direction, we have the motivation behind us to ask those questions, and we're not continuing to spin our wheels on something that may just be a fool's errand. So that's why I would support not tabling the motion.
John?
My understanding, because when I was on the council a million years ago, we did dispose of city property. If my recollection is still valid, council will probably refer this to the planning board. Am I correct? So it'll go to the planning board. The planning board will make a will discuss it, have a public meeting that people can attend and that type of thing, and then they will make a recommendation to the council. So to answer the question with regards to my issue with transparency, et cetera, there will be an opportunity for people. It won't just go to the council will make a decision. It'll go to the council. If my recollection is correct, they'll refer it to the planning board will schedule a public hearing on it, so there'll be a lot of opportunity for input. So if I'm not
sure it's a public hearing, but I think we go to the planning board.
It goes to the planning board, and they determine whether or not there's going to be a public hearing.
So there will be multiple bodies available so it will be presented in front of multiple bodies for multiple chances for public comment in lots of different viewpoints on the boards, from planning board to council.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think we need a parliamentarian ruling. We had a motion and a second, but then we had a request to table. I don't think that was a motion, and I don't know that it was seconded, but I think we've got to figure out what to talk about based on the motion.
I guess I was indirectly not knowing the rules, seconding Eric's.
So do we take up?
Let's formalize that.
So we need to take a vote.
So we need
on the tabling first.
So we need to. So we'll do a roll call vote on tabling this motion.
And tabling means we continue the discussion at our next.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Councillor Tabor?
No.
Mr. O'Leary?
No.
Megan?
Yes.
Dagan?
No.
Byron?
No.
Mary?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Tracy?
No.
Beth?
No.
Me? I'm torn on this because of time, but I really think it's important to start the process, that it is going to be a long process to get it in front of these other. So I'm sorry, no. No, sorry.
Give up the gavel.
All right,
Yes.
so now you're back to the main motion.
So now we're back to the main motion of sending this forward.
Is that been Made and seconded?
Yes.
Made and seconded. Is there any more discussion, or else I'm going to call the vote? Okay.
Wait,
Yes.
just one. I guess because it says the creation of permanent below market rate housing.
Yes.
I'm assuming like when we send the motion, it's because we're verbalizing it. Sherburne is inherently spelled correctly.
We will update any misspellings. Yes.
It's very important.
It is very important. And
And then I guess, are we saying below market rate housing? Are we saying workforce housing? Like, I guess we're kind of stuck on the definition.
and I think purposely written, much like I think the goal statement was to be all encompassing. That
So below market rate
Rate.
is all encompassing?
well, I would, in my perception, below market rate does include affordable housing and what would be the definition of workforce housing. So permanently below market rate. And I actually drew, when we were discussing the writing of this motion, drew a little bit from our email exchange where we looked at we were discussing other properties who are coming off of the tax incentives. And so again, the discussion that if we are, potentially, as some people say, losing city property, that it would be permanently, always, forever, indefinitely deed restricted to permanently affordable units. So it can never be in 30 years flipped over to market rate, which who knows what market rate is going to be in 30 years. So the term permanent was very specific that we would not lose these, as we know that we are losing hundreds of units that are weaning off of tax incentives.
And then I guess that narrows like the population that we're targeting, because there were discussions early on about, the definitions where it's, if it's rental, it's 60% of AMI for a home, I think a home
Purchase,
of 3 people or something. And then, for purchase, it's 100% AMI. So then it's not inclusive of, you would be like totally targeting and saying like not missing middle, but only those meeting the workforce housing definition. I guess I'm just trying
So
to
I
wrap
think
my head
so. I think that can all be worked out. What if it comes back with other recommendations that we can bring forward to council? This is again, we're not setting policy of what 100% will go there or 100% will not go there. We are making recommendations. So it will be up to the council or any future council as this goes through to determine what the policy will be when full disposition of this property. So I guess to your question, there's no yes or no to that question, in my opinion, as I perceive it.
If I could, Assistant Mayor?
Yes.
I think the question before us is, does the majority of this committee think that the housing crisis that we have mitigates that we use this land to solve that problem? Now, in diverse, affordable housing gives a significant range of how we solve that problem. But our decision tonight is, do we want to use this land to solve that problem?
Okay. Any more discussion? If not, I'm going to call the vote, and we're going to do a roll call vote. Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Mr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Corsetti?
No.
No. Dagan?
Yes.
Byron?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Tracy?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And yes for me. So motion.
Everybody else is a first name, and I'm Mr.
I don't know. Let's get John. I don't know, man.
You threw a Miss Corsetti.
I did because I felt bad because I kept dropping down. Okay. Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn, please.
Got it.
Second. All adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all.